Hello everyone, this is the second PC working group session. So here again for the end of this IETF week, we have a tight agenda again. The session is recorded as usual, so you should be used to that. The typical not well, you should be fully aware of that, but remember that, keep in mind that there are IETF rules about IPR on associated disclosure, so make sure you are following all the process that are pointed out here. Next, please. So guidelines. So this is another medical session. So keep in mind that even if we're on face-to-face, you should be respectful to each other. We shouldn't need to have the chair interrupting discussion or argument between people. So make sure that you respect all people contributing to the work we are trying to achieve here. Next, please. So the agenda, if anyone has something to bash from this second session, now is the time. Okay, so we'll move on. Next, please. And that's it. So keep in mind that we are recording the session. State your name when coming to the queue. Turn off your mic when you're on talking, and everything will go smooth. Then we have our first presentation, which is related to the issue that has been pointed out by Drew in the introduction last time. John legitimately refused an errata that was submitted by Oscar on a PC RFC. Clearly, the problem that is pointed out needs more than an errata to be fixed. So here, a first try to propose a resolution to the issue that has been pointed out. So, Draft, you have the floor now.
Thank you, Julian. So let's start. This is a new draft based on the issue that Julian was just talking about. This issue has a bit of history. The issue basically comes up because of our RBNF and a statement in our base 5440 draft, which requires strict object ordering in PCEP, and that keeps creating some issues. So the two issues which are highlighted in the errata are here. The recent one was between LSP object added for stateful PCEP and class type object, and what should be the order of these two objects in the request message is creating some confusion. Similar confusion happened back in SVEC list. This was errata 3672, where also Adrian at that time AD rejected the errata correctly, based that this errata is not the right way to handle it. In fact, working group had one proposal, which was a much bigger proposal, which was requiring that maybe we should have a consolidated grammar and in fact fix some of the inconsistencies that have popped up in the various extension. It was presented a couple of times, but it did not go anywhere. And then based on this errata, John suggested that maybe we could go back to 5440 and try to fix this, and which is this approach that we are discussing today. So what is the motivation? As I said, 5440 had a statement. That statement required that the object ordering should be as per the one that is defined in that document. Now that has caused some complexity. We saw the two erratas, and every time we see new PCEP extension, there is this confusion on should I go back and list all the objects? Should I list objects only listed in 5440? And then what happens when there is two documents which require strict ordering between some objects, and when all three of them are to be used together and there is some inconsistency? So basically this requires some kind of bookkeeping between all the parallel extensions. Another thing that happens, which is kind of unique with PCEP, is sometimes we have various different use cases of PCEP. There is like the optical side, there is now multicast side, and some of them, like the implementations, are sort of separate, and most of the time they don't interact with each other and things are fine. But Suppose there is a common implementation that is doing both, then only much later on we notice these issues. So that is also a very issue which is based on the reality of PSEP, where it has so many different disjoint use cases and disjoint implementations as well. So this has kind of become a problem that we have ignored for all this while. Let's see if we can try and fix it now. So what is this document saying? This document is saying, let's just update this statement. An implementation must form the PSEP message using the object ordering specified in this document. So change this must to should. Talk about not just this document, but subsequent document, and say that an implementation should be prepared to receive PSEP message when they are out of order. Now, this doesn't mean that ordering is completely going away. We should still do ordering. So while sending, PSEP should respect the ordering that is there in the RBNF, but when it is receiving, it could be a little bit more flexible, and spatially flexible when there is no ambiguity. Sometimes what happens is that the object present in two different places. The same object, for instance, if you take bandwidth object, that can be carried outside and also can be carried along with RRO, and it has two different meanings. So of course it should be completely unambiguous when it is parsing, but uh, when it doesn't really matter, the ordering doesn't matter, the parsing would anyway succeed. We should not have a very strict condition that the must of object ordering should be should be handled. So of course there is some wordsmithing that we may need to do to handle all the cases that are coming up. This is just a 0-0 proposal. We want to see whether this is the right approach and what does the rest of the working group thinks about this approach. So what happens? There is still a compatibility issue. Like if somebody is an older implementation is handling a very strict implementation, it can send an error saying that no, I follow 5440 and I have a strict handling. And if you send me a different order, I will kind of consider that as an error. One interesting point to notice, though 5440 had a must, it never defined an error condition for this case. So there is no error type and error value being generated when this out of order thing happens. And in fact, many implementations kind of keep this very future proof, which is like the normal way of being liberal when receiving and being a little bit strict when encoding and sending. So most of the implementation do follow this and do not send an error even correct. But there could be some implementation out there which could. So we can never we would have this compatibility issue with legacy changes. So, what does the working group think? Is this the right approach to this problem? There were past proposals. Should we go back to those past proposals? And if this is the right approach, then maybe a to-do for me and anybody else who wants to join in this work would be we should do a proper scan of all PSEP extensions and see that we don't leave any other text which requires object ordering issues, and we can handle it for once for all via this update. And I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. So the chairs would be happy to hear some feedback from people of the working group, and especially implementers. Existing implementation may have concerns about the proposal. So I see people in the queue. Andrew, you want to go first?
Hello, this is Andrew. Yeah, so my natural concern obviously is what you laid out, which is past implementations that follow essentially the strict writing in 5440 to do ordering. In terms of backwards compatibility, the end result is essentially, well, tough luck, you guys can't interop. So that's difficult for me to digest. But at the same time, I also don't have an alternative wordsmith. I mean, it's something that I'm going to have to think about to see, how can we allow the future, misordering while still allowing those past implementations to succeed. That I'm not quite sure yet. So right now, just to voice my opinion on it, I'm concerned with the backwards compatibility and the interop that we've been essentially hardening over the last couple of years, that this now may lead to, less interop, even though the goal is obviously more interop in the long run. So that's basically my concerns. Thanks.
Thank you. This is exactly the kind of feedback we are happy to hear, because we aren't supposed to choose in a very short term at the end of the session, obviously. So we want to collect as much feedback as possible and make sure that we will do a clever decision in the end of the process. This is just the first proposal. So this is exactly the kind of comment that we are happy to hear. So next one, Adrian.
Yeah, I want to ask, if the receiver can ignore the ordering of the object, what is the usage for the sender to order in the object when it's sending? And I think it is impossible to define the rule for ordering all so many type of objects in PCEP protocol.
Arjun, if I understand your comment, I think this is a usual philosophy in standards that we have followed, that while sending, you use must, but while receiving, you use should, so that we allow a little bit more liberal process, so that, like, unnecessarily we don't cross error conditions. So that is the history for this, and this is quite common. For instance, if you look at RSVP, which I think even Adrian pointed out, they do not have the strict ordering rule, and they follow the same RBNF and similar objects than PCEP. And I'm looking at the time, so Julian, just
Yeah,
I've overrun the time, so just
lock the queue on Oscar is next.
Hi. So just in the past few years, we have suffered for several problems in the interops. So I think that regardless that you allow some flexibility in some places, I think that the grammar needs to be revisited. I mean, in a whole, either you choose to be fully strict and then you put all the orders or the objects in a same place, like we tried to do several years ago with the draft. That at that point the working group didn't decide to go that direction. Or if you want to relax, you need to say where to relax, because in general, if you suddenly say that a protocol that is designed to be in an order, you suddenly say that it is not an order, that does not work. So even as you say, in some places might fit, but you would need a careful thinking of all the grammar as a whole. Okay, so in any case, you need to revisit all the grammar, even if you take this direction or follow the complete strict ordering. Thank you.
Thank you, Oscar. Boris?
Yes, hi. Dhruv, yes, I support this approach. I think this is the right way to proceed. Only one comment. Maybe it would be good to signal this relaxing capability as additional PCEP capability to align with old implementations and new implementations to sync up. This is just proposal.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea to share. Thank you. Mike?
That being liberal, in what you accept, in terms of ordering or whatever, being liberal in what you accept is always a good thing. So it's kind of it's assumed that implementations will follow it. So I think I think it's a good idea. We can maybe specify ordering relative between, say, two objects. That, for example, okay, path attribute object has to go right before the ERO object, right? But in terms of globally having to have some kind of a global ordering, I don't think that's necessary at all. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Mike. So thank you, people, for this interesting discussion. We'll move to the next presentation and we'll resume the other one on the mailing list for sure. So Kwan, I think you're the presenter.
You, Julie.
Yeah,
I would like
we can hear you.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I would like to talk about the PCEP extensions for topology filter on behalf of the co-authors. So next slide, please. So let's first do the quick recap. The PCET constraint draft has been proposed and presented during last 2 years. It proposed a set of constraints for PCEP the network information such as ID, multi-topology ID, slice ID, color, and FAID. And now it has been replaced into 4 drafts. First, we proposed a new draft to define the for path computation. It is the current presenting draft. And the second, we merged the kernel TLV to the new kernel draft. Third, the FAID is merged into the seed algorithm. And finally, the new draft to define the slice ID constraint. So last slide, please. This draft is mainly about the topology filter. First, the topology filter is defined in TIS Young topology filter draft, and it has been discussed in TIS on Tuesday. A topology filter is a data construct that can be applied on either a native topology or a user-specified topology, and viewed as a set of filtering rules. Each topology filter can be constructed by topology reference and or a set of include alien, include or, and exclude filtering. So the document proposes a set of extensions for PSAP to support the topology filter as the topology constraints during the path computation. Last slide, please. So first, we defined a new topology carry the topology filter. So the following TLV can be carried in topology object to identify the topology reference. Reference to topology could be a specific IGP domain, which is identified by source protocol ID, an instance ID, multi-topology ID, area ID, seed algorithm, and so on. Next slide, please. So the details, the source protocol TLV is defined for topology and identified for the specific source protocol ID. The protocol ID is defined in as is and OSPF and BGP-IOS. Multi-topology TLV is also defined for the topology ID. For the topology identified by the multi-topology ID. And the aerial TLV is also defined for topology identified by the specific area ID. Next slide, please. We also defined the topology filter. The topology also can be specified by a set of include alien, include all, and exclude filtering rules, and it can be applied on the native topology. So this document also proposed a set of extensions for IRO and XRO object. For example, link ID, admin group, and source protocol, and so on. Sub-objects to achieve the include alien, include, and exclude filtering rules for the topology field. Next slide, please. So that's the order extensions for PSAP. Any question, comments, and discussions are very welcome. Thank you.
I see people
Jimmy. Yeah, Jimmy, go ahead.
The first question is, I see you mentioned a new draft on NRPID. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just checked this new draft just submitted this week, which is related to network slicing. Before this meeting, we have submitted a draft on the PSAP extension for VTN, which will be presented next. perhaps my suggestion is you can follow the discussion in the TIS working group about the relationship between these works. Yeah, this is the first comment.
Yeah, I agree with you. I know. Okay, you go first.
Okay, the second one is there's a topology filter Young model, but I see there's some difference between these two drafts in the content. Like the T topology is not covered in this one. A division ID is not covered. I'm not sure whether you want to have the consistent definition of the topology filter.
Okay, thank you. For the first question, is your draft and the slice ID constraint for extended for the LSPA object. We proposed it 2 years ago. So as we all know, the TIFs didn't reach agreement about the term of the identifier of the network slice. So I think it's up to the judge to reach the final agreement for the identifier, the term of the identifier for the slice, so network slice. For the second question, yes, you're right. The division ID is not included for in the current version. We will consider it lesser version. And the topology TE topology, we don't consider it because the it is not a pro point for the in my opinion. Thanks.
Maybe one further comment is maybe you need to consider the relationship and about the topology filter in the Young model and the topology filter in this PSAP. What is the procedure and the order of using this rule, this mechanism to provision this information either from controller to the device, or you want to send a request from the device to the controller? What is the procedure and the order of this kind of thing? I think this is not clear from the current drafts.
Let's move on. Robin, okay. Quickly, very quick comments.
My two comments. The first one, I doubt about this. The first page, I think that is one draft. Why is divided into the 4 draft? Maybe more draft will be proposed. The first one. The second one, I think that's the constraint. I think there's can be the different constraint, but I doubt if there's the requirement or not.
Thanks, Robin. I think let's move on. Just a general comment. This we will follow whatever like the T's suggest. We will be looking out to from the guidance from T's chair and T's working group on how to how to process. And anyway, we are requesting the authors to keep alignment between the T's document and this document. And there are some other comments which I will send it on the list. But let's move on.
Thank you, Dur.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So I'm Min Xue from China Mobile. So I'm going to present this support for VPN in PCP on behalf of all the authors. Okay, next, please. So the VTN is a virtual underlay network consisting of a set of dedicated or shared network resources, and is associated with a customized logical topology. So it is introduced in the draft TEAS enhanced VPN and can be used to enable enhanced VPNs for the network slice realization. So when computing or establishing a parse in a VTN, PCE needs to take VTN-specific resource and topology attributes into consideration. And this document will describe the PCEP extensions to carry VT information in PCEP messages for VTN-specific parse computation request and response, or also the report and update and parse initiation. Okay, next please. Also, a new TLV called VTN TLV is defined to carry the VTN ID and related information in the LSPA object. The VTN ID is a global significant 32-bit identifier to indicate that a VTN, and the flags fields are reserved for future use, and some optional sub-TLVs which can carry additional constraints. And a new PCP capability called VTN capability is introduced, and we define 1 bit D bit in the flags field when it is set by PCC to 1, and it indicates that the PCC supports the encapsulation of data plane VTN ID in data packet. And when it's set to 1 by PCE, it indicates that PCE is supposed to provide parse commutation result with the data plane VTN ID. Okay, and next, please. So for the VTN TLV, it can be used in the basic PCE parse computation. It can be carried in a PC request message to indicate that the VTN in which the parse computation is requested, and the PCE should use a network resource and the topology attributes associated with a specific VTN as the parameters of the parse computation. And this TLV may be carried in the PC reply message to indicate the PCC should use the VTN specific resources to constructing the TE path. In the case of parse computation failure, the PC reply message may carry the VTN TLV to indicate that the computation was not successful. Okay, next please. And this TLV can be used for parse report and update of the stateful PCE. A PCC may include this VTN TLV in PC report message to indicate that VTN in which the TE path is reported. And the PCE may include a VTN TLV. Okay, the VTN TLV can be used in PCE initiated LSP setup. The PCE may include the VTN TLV in the PCE initialed message, and it will PCC will use a VTN specific resource and data plane VTN ID to construct the TE path, and the mechanism is applicable to the initial MPLS LSPs and the SR policies candidate paths. Okay, next. So the next, we will welcome the comments and feedbacks. We will polish this draft based on the feedbacks. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We already have Tarek in the queue. So Tarek, go ahead.
Thank you for the presentation. As you know, TEAS working group agreed on network resource to call the underlay resources associated with a slice network resource partition, and we can pass a NRP ID in the PSAP message. I'm not sure if you want to standardize passing two IDs, a VTN ID and an RP ID. Maybe authors of this draft should collaborate with authors of the draft that Kwan had mentioned earlier. I would like to hear the working group chair's opinion on that as well.
Tariq, are we sure that we have this resolved in T's already? At least that's not my reading, and I would welcome like T's chairs to correct me if I'm saying that wrong. Otherwise, we have Jimmy. Jimmy, go ahead.
Just to answer your question, I did see the term network resource partition in the slice definitions draft that Adrian and editors are driving. So maybe we can.
But this is but this is coming from enhanced VPN, right? So, and we thought that enhanced VPN has applicability outside of network slicing as well. So my understanding was that these two, like, we cannot say that VTN ID can disappear. At least that's what I was reading. So please correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, exactly. That's the point. Is any protocol, generic protocol extensions has to reference the generic term, which is network resource partition. Otherwise, we will end up duplicating protocol extensions. And that was the whole point of coming up with a generic term. So indeed, yeah.
So we're looking for T's, guidance on this. Jimmy, you already said, or you are in the queue. Jimmy, go ahead.
I just want to say that, we just have sent a mail to have some discussion about the relationship between enhanced VPN and the network slicing T's mailing list. I suggest people to provide their feedbacks and opinions to that. Based on that, we can see whether they have the different scope or not. Whether we can use converge to a generic term for the protocols, the models, etc. I think
Thank you. Thanks for clarifying.
There.
Pawan, go ahead.
You had a question for the teachers. So there was an open item after the last interim on, or maybe even before that, that there was a thread that Adrian started. I see him in the queue on what we need to call that underlay construct, and I think there were a few names that are floated around. We let, from the chair's point of view, we let the authors of the framework document pick what they thought was appropriate. I see. I mean, the term that has been picked in the draft is a network resource partition. As to whether there was a formal declaration of that being the term, I mean, there hasn't been any declaration of that. We have let the editor pick what he's deemed appropriate, and I'll let the editor talk.
Adrian?
Yeah, thanks. So I'm editor for the T's framework. Pavan is right that there's no consensus being called on what the text in the framework says. I believe that the intention is to provide a common base reference and definitions and allow other documents to either use that terminology or to say what we're doing in this document maps to the base terminology as follows. I don't think we are attempting to force people to rewrite their documents or change their solutions, merely to explain how their solutions map to the framework.
Thanks, Adrian. I think let's continue this discussion on the mailing list. We will be looking for T's feedback, whether an RP ID and VTN ID are two different IDs, they are the same ID, they belong. So that will have impact on progressing these documents. So thank you. So Gyan, you're next.
All right. Hi, my name is Gyan Mishra. I'm with Verizon, and I will be presenting an update on the PCEP LS draft. Next slide. So over the last few months, I believe since IETF 110, we have gotten some feedback. We presented at IETF 110 So just some highlights as far as feedback. So some key scenarios where the PCEP-LS comes into play is PCE-CC and HPCE, and we'll go through that, just some recaps in further slides. So this is an experimental ID with an aim to progress R&D efforts, and it's not. And so just to be clear for everyone in the working group that this is not a replacement for any existing mechanisms. There are specific scenarios highlighted with the reuse of the PCEP session where this information is deemed useful, and that particularly in the use cases of PCE-CC. What would be useful is to progress this draft is to find if there's interest in the experimental work and then pull the work group for adoption. Next slide. So some feedback. So we had some positive feedback on list a few months ago. So Ajin Wang with China Telecom showed some key interest. He highlighted the use of PCEP-LS and PCE-CC scenarios. Peter Park with Telco KT had also expressed interest, as well as Bin Yun with ETRI. So we would like to ask the work group for adoption as an experimental track, and that's really the goal of this draft. The scope and goal of the experiment would include testing the solution, viability, and to help eliminate any concerns. And then post-adoption, what we would like to do is refine the scope of the experiments and expected outcome, especially targeting scalability concerns and impacts in other protocols in the network. So with the post-adoption, as we go through that, we just want to, and it's really in building the scope, we want to actually have folks in the work group to, have a comfort level with this, so we're not overloading the protocol, we're not overloading with PCEP, using PCEP for the PCEP-LS and leveraging the southbound interface. So and with that, and that really would be part of the development and the R&D effort, the overall effort that we'd like to move forward with, once the draft is adopted. Next slide. Sorry, next slide. Thanks. Oh. Durv, I think the slides went away.
Offline.
It looked like Trev was dropped.
Huh.
Can you hear us, Trev? No, offline.
I can try to share myself if he's not. Let me see. I haven't done it before, but I can try and give it a shot. Do you want me to try and go ahead and share, or
I can give it a try.
Or Julian, if you have the slides, I guess if you could share it, I guess.
They're already uploaded. So how can I share them? Oh, draft back.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see that.
Can you hear us, Draft?
Oh, I got disconnected. So let me quickly go back. Am I on the right slide? One back.
Yes, so we're just one more down after that. Let's see. Yes, right here. Okay, thanks. All right, so a quick overall recap. So update on the latest feedback with the PCE working group and work group adoption call. Use of PCEP to learn network state and topology, applicable to device to controller as well as controller to controller HPCE, complementary extensions. And this is really another tool in the operator's toolbox. So we have existing mechanisms, and this would be another mechanism. So we're not replacing anything or changing. We're just adding another option for operators, and for particular use cases. And the one main one in particular is operators that are already using PCE-CC, and in those scenarios where they have the centralized controller, they could easily leverage PCEP-LS. A new PCEP object, message and object, and reuse of the TLVs already defined. Default is local only, and then which is the R equals 0, which is the goal that we would like to have the centralized to use PCEP-LS for the building the topology graph, but we have the flexibility to use R=1 defining the graph that you can have a hybrid setup and use other mechanisms as well as PCEP-LS. So we'd like to make it, homogeneous to other mechanisms that exist, and we're not forcing anything to go one way or the other. We just kind of want to keep an open mind, and that is also the further work as we reach work of adoption and consensus. We can go dig into that more detail. Next slide. So some use cases and scenarios to recap. So PCCC, some use cases require direct PCEP session to all nodes. Reusing that same session to learn the network state is attractive. So not having a second protocol such as BGP-LS, enabling the possibility of a single SBI for some use cases. And then HPCE and ACTN for inter-AS scenarios between controllers for boundary nodes and links as part of the abstraction domain topology. And then partial, so some information such as optical extensions learned via PCEP-LS for faster learning, reuse of PCEP synchronization optimization techniques and incremental updates, as well as other mechanisms can coexist. Next slide. So on the left here, we've gone through this slide before, but showing the basic mechanism. So we're using the existing PCE-CC centralized control architecture. So you have the PCC instructions are sent down on the left to each node. For each node's PCE session, and then the topology graph link and node information sent back up to the controller on the left, PCEP-LS node information. On the right slide showing the HPCE. So everything is supported as exists with the HPCE using PCEP-LS, and in this case, in that scenario, the child PCE, the PCEP-LS information link and node information sent from the child PCE node back up to the parent node. Next slide. So ready for adoption. So we believe over the last several months since IETF110 when we presented, we feel that we have garnished some interest in the working group. So the answer to that is yes, we have. And are there target experiments, demos, implementations? And the answer to that is yes as well. So some were showcased in the past at a hackathon in bits and bytes. Some open source implementations exist and documented. Some research has shown interest and experimented, and some operators have shown interest as we described it in the earlier slides. So now the question is there a possibility of somewhat getting a rough consensus to support for this as an experimental ID? So I believe at this point, I think the answer is yes, and we would like to after this IETF completes, we would like to maybe pull the work group and the chairs for start a work group adoption poll. Thank you.
Thanks, Jan. Any questions for Jan? Go ahead, Cheng.
I just want to say that I really want to work on this work. It's a really good work, and we do really need it because we have BGP already. And if you want to make the PCEP protocol like perfect, then we need to finish this work. So that's it.
Thanks, Cheng.
Thank you.
Robin?
There's their scenarios. There's no the BDP link state. So I think that the PC link state definitely have the application scenario.
Thank you, Robin.
Thank you, Robin.
Yeah, we prefer the usage of the PCEP-LS as the BGP-LS. So that is to say, there is only one router can report the topology information to the PCE. I think this can certainly simplify the implementation of the controller and the router. Okay.
Thank you, Edwin.
Thanks, Jan.
All right, thanks, Drew.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hello, I am Huanan Li from China Telecom. We specify PCEP extensions to optimize the implementation of multicast source registration or revocation, receiver automatic discovery, and forwarding control of multicast data by using PCEP messages to transmit multicast management signaling in SDN scenario, combining with the forwarding characteristics of beer. By using this mechanism, the unified management of beer multicast can be implemented and the impact of BGP updates on controller can be reduced. Next page, thank you. The process consists of 4 main steps. The first, ingress and PCP message with multicast source information to the controller for multicast source registration. The second, egress convert IGMP or MLD messages receiving from receivers into PCP message to send to the controller as PCE for receivers joining or leaving. The third, the controller sends a bit string that is stitched based on the source and the receiver information, informing the ingress how to forward or stop forwarding. The fourth, the receiver statistics is regularly synchronized between egress and PCE or between PCE and ingress. Some comments were made at a previous meeting, including the objects format here are dense. It is suggested to break these objects down more. The objects are tightly coupled with beer. Multicast information in PCEP message should be able to use in non-beer multicast scenario. In this update, the overall process has not changed. Our main change from the previous version is to put some duplicate fields into TLVs, increasing the extensibility of messages. In addition, the judgment flag for beer multicast is added. By carrying different TLVs, multicast information in PCP message can also be used to non-beer multicast scenario. We defined 4 new TLVs, namely multicast source address TLV, multicast group address TLV. Next, VPN information TLV and beer information TLV. VPN information TLV contains RD and forwarding tag. The label length can be set to 0. Beer information TLV contains router identification information in beer domain or subdomain, specifically subdomain ID, BFR ID, and BSL. sorry. The multicast source registration object and multicast receiver information object add a beer flag indicating whether the message is beer multicast. These two objects can be used in both beer and non-beer scenario. VPN information TLV and beer TLV can be selected carried in these two messages. Next page. Thank you. Next page. Thank you. Forwarding indication object contains beer forwarding information, specifically subdomain ID, SI, BSL, and bitstring. FI object does not need to carry beer information TLV and can only be used in beer scenario. Next page, thank you. Multicast receiver status object should should include multicast source address TLV and multicast group address TLV. The usage is consistent in beer scenario and non-beer scenario. That's the main content of this draft. Any comment on our work are welcomed. Thank you.
Thank you, Yonan. Any questions? While we are waiting for questions, this was presented in Beer's working group as well, and we had a discussion following that how do we coordinate the work between PCE and Beer. And one of the suggestion was that we need to get a very clear set of requirements from the Beer working group and overall architecture that we can check against. Right now in PCE, there are a couple of documents related to Beer, and the overall requirements and architecture is not very clear. Even if we take this document, for instance, there is a lot of beer and non-beer things inside the same document, and which is kind of very confusing when we read. So we need to look at this whole work holistically. Any other, that's just my thoughts. Any other comments from the working group? Tony, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think as we talk in the beer working group, Dhruv, I think the best is to pull interim with the charter being pretty much a requirements document from your side and from our side as beer. And let's see what comes out of that. So people are on the same page and we get all these documents under the same umbrella and we, in sync architecturally speaking. So I suggest to get together with Greg and set up something and start rolling an interim and work on kind of the charter of the interim, or rather of work items during the interim, if you are okay with that.
Thanks, Tony. Let's continue discussing. Aijin, go ahead.
I think the people in the beer working group has some interested for the PC-based solution for the multicast signaling. So here the update for this draft just want to make the object as general as possible as the comment from last meeting. So I think we can discuss this later during the interim meeting between the beer and the PCE. Okay.
Yeah, Arjun, I agree. The only comment mine was that the document is called PC-based beer. Then it should not have non-beer parts in it. We need to have a clarity of what is applicable for any multicast overlay. And we had RSVP, we have SR P2MP policy as well. So we don't want things which are generic to be a part of a beer extension to PC. That was what I was trying to say.
Okay.
Gyan, go ahead.
Yeah, Dhruv, I was just going to chime in on the same, that I think this document, it should really focus on beer and not non-beer related, as it does confuse the goal of the document. Since there's already, I believe, RFC 6006, which talks about point-to-multipoint PCE extension. So there's already existing work that deals with non-beer specific multicast. So I agree, this should be really just beer related.
Thanks, Jan. Let's move ahead. We still have 2 presentations to go. Balaji, are you here? Yes, go ahead. Balaji, the slides are already in front. Do you mind if we continue? We are running out of time, so please go ahead and start speaking. Balaji, you need to click on the mic button to start speaking. Yeah, go ahead now. And we lost Balaji. Yeah, Balaji, go ahead. Okay, it seems like we're having audio issues. So let's move on to the next one and we'll come back to Balaji once we have time. So we have 5 minutes and 2 presentation. Wangyu, would you like to start and try to do it at 2 minutes so that we can give Balaji time as well?
Okay, it's my turn.
Yeah, go ahead quickly.
Oh, okay, thank you. Oh, hi, experts. I'm Yuan from China Telecom. I'll introduce our draft and some essential updates. Considering the large-scale development of Ethernet interface, it is possible to use the info contained in the Layer 2 frame to simplify the end-to-end packet forwarding procedure. Based on RFC 9050, which specifies the PCAP extensions for PCCC to derive MPLS label switch paths, this document defines PCAP extension for VLAN-based traffic forwarding in native IP network. Compared with RFC 8821, which describes an architecture for PCE-based traffic engineering in native IP networks, this draft describes the processes of data packet forwarding system based on VLAN info. Okay, next slide, please. Well, as shown in this figure, the procedures for VLAN-based traffic forwarding are as follows. The first step, the PCE calculates the explicit route and sends the route information to the PCCs through PCE initiate messages. Step 2, the ingress PCC like R3 forms a VLAN forwarding routing table. The transit PCC like R1, R2, and R4, and the egress PCC like R5 forms a VLAN crossing routing table. Step 3, the packet to be guaranteed matches the table and then be labeled with corresponding VLAN tag as marked in the red line. Step 4, the labeled packet will be further sent to the PCC's specific subinterface identified by the VLAN tag and then be forwarded. Next slide, please. Well, the data packet encapsulation processes is shown in this figure. When the original data packet was sent to the egress node, it will look up the VFR table of R1. If matched, the packet will be labeled with the corresponding VLAN tag. The labeled packet then will be sent to the transit node. Similarly, it will look up the VCR table, which only contains the in and out VLAN and then be forwarded. To the egress node, the out VLAN of VCR table is 0. So the VLAN will be unlabeled and returns to the normal forwarding. The advantage of this mechanism contains 3 points. The first one is it uses a completely new address space. The second one, it is suitable for IPv4 and IPv6 networks. And the last one is it can leverage the existing PCE technologies as much as possible. Next slide, please. Based on the last version, we made some updates on the CCI object to indicate the specific interface of each node, and a new bit O to differentiate the in and out VLAN. Next slide, please. And these are the updates of the corresponding message content. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, that's the main content of our draft. Any comments are welcome. Thank you.
Aijun, go ahead. Quick comment, please.
Just to give one more explanation. The solution for the solution is just similar with the MPS for traffic forwarding, but can utilize the existing VLAN field. This can meet the IPv4 and IPv6 environment. And we are trying to align with the PCECC solution for the LSP path establishment. Okay, that's all.
Thanks, Aijun. Balaji, go ahead. Let's give it a shot. We lost Balaji, so maybe Pavan, can you present instead? Go ahead, Pavan.
Yeah. Can you go to the next slide? Yeah, we did present the PCEP RSVP color draft last time, at the last IETF. There were some comments primarily to make it a bit more generic. So that's what we ended up doing. Can you go to the next slide? So yeah, it's a single TLV. It's generalized. It's used for the use case that was described last time. It continues to exist. It just allows for it to be used for other use cases as well. There are a couple of them that are listed here. The PC multipath already references it. There was also this notion of uh, using it the same way as the policy, the policy association. It's a debatable use case, but yeah, I mean, there was a proposal to do that. We just left room in case somebody wants to use it for that purpose. And yeah, there are a few more authors added to the list. Next slide. Yeah, I think it's something that's missing in the toolkit. Yeah, we believe it's sufficiently big to progress to the next stage. Request working group adoption and further review from the working group. Thanks.
Pawan, I could not find where this TLV is going to be carried, which PSEP object.
It's in the LSPA. It depends. It kind of depends on the use case. So in the case of Mike's draft, the multi-path draft, it would sit under the path attrib. So yeah, I mean, we have defined the
But
TLV here. Yeah, we would let the
yeah,
use case describe where it actually sits.
but you do have that RSVP use case as well, right? So at least for RSVP use case, you need to specify where
We
is
do.
this TLV carried.
We do.
No, correct.
We do. If you, in the section
No,
that
I
talks about RSVP use case, I think there should be a statement in there saying
nah,
where it's
it,
carried.
it doesn't. It's in front
Okay,
of
I
me.
take
It
your word.
doesn't. So
I take your
just
word. I will add that.
any other
Okay.
last comments from the working group? Otherwise, we are 1 minute over. I don't see anything. So Julian, last words to you.
Just to say goodbye. Thank you everyone for attending the very last slot of IETF 112. Maybe we have a little chance to meet face to face next time, but in any case, we'll meet at least in virtual meetings. So take care, everyone. Talk to you soon.
Bye,
Thank
folks.
you everyone
Take
for
care.
attending and presenting.
Bye.
Bye, Drew.
Bye.